welcome. This training or this session is called The Connection Between Evidence-Based Practices and the New High-Quality Instructional ELA Materials, and it is geared towards 3 through 5. Because that title is lengthy and a little bit of a mouthful, just to give you the unofficial title, it's really just best practices in ELA and also what's new with our newly developed curriculum for grades 3 through 5. If I have not had the opportunity to meet you yet, my name is Carrie Greetham, and I am an instructional staff developer that mostly supports grades 3 through 5, and I have been the 5th grade content lead now for the last 6 years. But I am transitioning a little bit out of that role and moving into more of like the role of a Dolores Hudson or Connie Dierking. So if you have any questions regarding grades 3 through 5 ELA, give me a shout out and let me know, and I'll help you to the best of my ability. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. But before we launch too deep into our training, I have somebody I would like you to meet. This is Tyree. Tyree Buchanan was, I had the privilege of teaching him in 2009 and 2010 as a 6th grader and a 7th grader. So even though I'm referring him to little Tyree, you can see little Tyree was bigger than me when I taught him. And if I were to describe little Tyree back in 2009, I would describe him as hardworking and kind. He never excluded others. He was a talented football player, very motivated football player, and just an all-around lovable kid. One way I would not describe him necessarily as is as an avid reader, and at best a reluctant writer. He wanted to do well and he wanted to try, but you could tell by the look on his face he hated every minute of it, but he still wanted to please his teacher and do the right thing, but you could tell it just, at least in 6th grade, just wasn't his favorite thing. And now fast forward to 2022, this is Tyree in his dorm room in San Francisco. He is at an art university, art and design, and they do all kinds of things. But I had the opportunity or the privilege of hearing from him back in November of this past year, and it's so rare, I don't know about for you, that we actually get to hear from our former students years and years later and how they have grown and changed and progressed and all their successes. And so he sent me what I can only at best call is his testimony and his success story, and this is what it said. It's a Friday night in November, and he said, "Hey, this is Tyree Buchanan Strader from Ottawa Middle School. You had such an important impact on me, and I hated writing and reading, and don't we know it? We saw that daily at first. But you made it fun and taught me how to write. You motivated me to read, made reading seem cool, and that intelligence is an attribute to seek. Thank you for everything. You went beyond your job. I'm now in college learning how to create characters for movies and learning how to direct. I wouldn't be here without you. Thank you." And I thought, my Tyree. So here's the thing about Mr. Tyree. The fact that he's directing movies, what I'm hoping is that you'll see my name somewhere in the opening credits in some kind of like major motion picture near you in the future, or at least on a streaming device. I'll take like a Netflix original, like whatever. Just look for my name. But I don't actually share this to elevate my own esteem. I share this story because, here guys, there's some seats. Here, let's work this out. I share his story to remind us all of our why this year with our curriculum changes, this year with our best standards changes, the first year of implementation. I share this because there are a lot of changes. But one thing does not change, and that is why we're here, what our mission and purpose is, and so that you all as leaders can champion the work of strong ELA instruction. All right, I'm gonna let them settle. Everybody good?
I'm just making some work, so Carrie, don't mind me.
You know, it's just my recorded session, so it's perfect, it's wonderful.
You wanna restart?
I don't. All right, so anyway, I asked Tyree, can I share your story so I can inspire administrators in Pinellas County schools to champion this work of best practices in ELA and to expect these best practices to be implemented well in the ELA classrooms? And this was Sunday afternoon, this past Sunday. I also asked him for the updated picture. And he said, yes, of course. And he said, thank you for this opportunity. And he's just like so formal now. But he says, my hope is that these students, meaning the students in your schools, and these teachers they will have teachers that inspire them to read, step out of their comfort zone, and to use writing to express themselves. And I thought, Tyree, you nailed it. That is the focus of my session. And that is what we're going to try to do, is come up with a collective definition of what are best practices, evidence-based practices in ELA. And I ask you this, how do we get our teachers to be able to do this? And I'm going to ask it to you in this way. What instructional practices are must-haves, in your opinion, based on your experiences in ELA? Take 1 minute to talk at your table groups and list out some of those best practices must-haves. Okay, you need a table.
We can share.
Oh, here. Oh, wait, what about this?
Oh, wow.
We're not feeling this?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
All right. You want to sit here? You want to sit here? Yeah. In the teacher chair? Brooke? Fair is not always equal. All right.
And so they don't cut their teaching, they cut that practice.
Oh, there's no problem. That's so tight. You should just come here.
No, I'm going to pull it out over here.
Oh my goodness. Okay. All right, leaders, so popcorn out just some of the best practices that somebody said or you said at your table. Modeling.
Building background knowledge.
Building background knowledge.
Opportunities to talk.
Opportunities to talk. What else?
Opportunities to practice.
Opportunities to practice. Right, so these are evidence-based practices. We're going to look at 5 evidence-based practices really closely today, and then how those things are implemented in the ELA block. Believe it or not, that was just my hook. We haven't even really started the session. I know, that was just my hook. If this were my classroom, and if this were my classroom, which it is today, this would be your learning target, right? This would be what I hope that you walk away with, which is to deepen your knowledge around evidence-based practices and how those practices influence our developed ELA, our newly developed ELA instructional materials and instructional planning. We're going to do that by just going over some of the desired outcomes of our district, going over some rules and mandates from the state of Florida, and then how our evidence-based practices in the new curriculum essentially align. And we'll look really closely at a couple sample lessons just so you can familiarize yourself with them and help your teachers navigate them as well. All right, so I'm not going to read this slide to you, but just take a minute. These are on our new, which has not been posted yet, but our K-12 literacy plan for our district. So if you can see it, just take a minute to read to yourself what our collective desired outcomes are. Got it? If you got it, say got it. Good job. That was an emphatic got it. You must know that this is recorded. All right, and if you have to share news from the state of Florida, you might as well do it in like the sunniest, most tropical way possible, right? And so these are kind of our mandates or our codes under our current administration of what is mandated in the state of Florida for education. So it just says elementary schools K-5 must teach reading in a dedicated, uninterrupted block of 90 minutes, which is something we are used to. Daily to all students. The reading block will include whole group instruction. Again, utilizing an evidence-based sequence of reading instruction, and small group differentiated instruction in order to meet individual student needs. And then it breaks it down even further into parts, that same document, where it's talking about the evidence-based sequence of reading instruction, and I think some of you said this too, using text to increase students' background and literacy skills, particularly across the content areas, right? And that's something we've always strived to do, and it's something we're continuing to reinforce: our social studies content, our science content, and even more so than ever before, the arts in the newly designed curriculum. And then providing small group differentiated instruction in order to meet individual student needs. This, to be honest, is a continuation of those requirements from the state of Florida, but to me, it just feels like they just summarized everything that we just went through, but you'll have this presentation if you want to continue the rich state reading on your own time. All right, are you ready to play a game? And this is when you're like, yes! We are going to play a little game where we're going to look at some evidence-based practices, 5 components of high-quality instruction. And at your tables, you'll see the little brown baggies. And those little brown bags are just always, it's always exciting to know what's the surprises in the brown bag. And what you're going to see in there are cards that are labeled with each of these components of high-quality instruction. You'll also see 5 descriptors or definitions of each of those things. So your job is to work in groups of 2 or 3. I prefer not the whole table if possible, but if you just want to go rogue and do it anyway, like, it's okay. I'm not going to stop you, but take a minute now, and as fast as you possibly can, I want you to pull your cards out and start sorting, matching your definition to your component. Go, go, go. Oh, you need a bag? Yes. Sorry, girls. Go, go, go.
Informational intelligence, feedback, adaptive instruction, differentiated, landscape. We're not.
But are you right? You were so motivated, I didn't even tell you if you won anything.
Come on.
The ELA guru of the group. All right, a team already finished. They feel very confident. You guys are finished? Okay, you feel good? They don't even know what they're winning. I love and affection and pride. Okay, you're about 5 minutes too late, Miss Painter.
We've been done, I mean.
You're in 3rd place. We're top 3. All right, so here's your next task. I'm going to tell you if you're right or not. I'm going to give you your answer key, and you're going to check your work. However, before I give you your little cheat sheet, your answer key, I want you now to talk about, this part's not as fun. This part, you're going to talk about in your building, what are areas of which of these components are your teachers collectively, and I know that's a little difficult to say, but as a school in grades 3 through 5, particularly with the lens around ELA, are your teachers just kind of rocking? You see it, you see evidence of it in the classrooms, and which of these components would you like to sharpen or strengthen or work on as a collective group of grades 3 through 5. I'm going to come around with this, before you start talking, with this little guide that has the components. You can check if you got yours correct when you did your match, but it also has a really nice column that shows like what it looks like and sounds like when it's implemented well, and then what it looks like and sounds like when maybe we've missed the mark and we're not quite implementing it in the way that it should be done. Okay, so go ahead and have some conversations, and I'll bring your cheat sheet around to give you some language to help you have those conversations. All right, here's what I'm gonna do. Pass this to you and just start passing on. I'll take the extras if you want to take one and start passing it on. If you want to take one and then pass it on. I just want to take one of these and pass it around. I'll take the extras. Oh yeah, go for it.
Just get things up now, exactly, yeah, same, I think the same thing.
Extra?
But like maybe with assessment and grab
Thank you.
level below, like
Did you get it right? Did you get yours right? I think in some capacity we've done a training on each one of these things. All right, if you will take the next few seconds to wrap up your conversations. So we're going to come back to this tool before the end of the session, and we're going to come back to studying these components within the actual curriculum in just a minute. But before we do that, I just wanted to introduce you to this document because I think it gives us some language to provide our teachers with feedback around evidence-based practices. But I also think that it can be easy to define different practices in different ways. So this is a nice way that we all have some collective definitions and descriptions of what we mean when we say systematic instruction or what we mean when we say differentiated instruction. So that's a tool I would definitely keep handy if I were in your position. We're going to come back to that resource and really look at it closely side by side with a couple of actual lesson plans, as I was saying earlier. But now, I want to just first do a little bit of housekeeping as to what's new before we dive too deep into lessons. Obviously, this is our first year in grades 3 through 5 with implementing the best standards and benchmarks. And so that is going to be a learning curve in and of itself. And I think core instruction will probably be our focus, at least initially, till we get our feet wet in it. But the year at a glance, I think this is a good change, a good thing that's new, is going to align now K-5. So we'll all be on these 4-week modules, right? Modules A through H, 4-week modules, 20 lessons will be provided in reading, writing, word study, and in just a minute we'll talk about cursive handwriting making its comeback. So modules A through H. Now, I'll show you just a 5th grade. It'll be a little tricky to see, and that's okay. You don't need to read the words necessarily, but this is just an example of the modules A through H in 5th grade. So the dates run 4 weeks, as I was saying, August 10th through September 9th. But in that window, there's 22 days of instruction, and they'll receive 20 lessons. So they'll have flexibility and room to reteach or to a lesson to go across multiple days if like the independent practice calls for it or something like that. They have a little more wiggle room in Module B, September 12th through October 13th. That's 25 days of instruction. I don't know anything about the FAST assessment. I don't know the windows for that, but I would assume if we're going to do a beginning, a middle, and an end of year checkpoint, they're going to need some of those flex days to observe that. Modules C and E will be the writing cycle assessments. So modules B and D used to be the writing cycle assessment. Now it's modules C and E. That does not necessarily mean all grades K through 5 will be writing the same kind of writing though. So like 5th grade, we're starting with argumentative, which is formerly known as opinion. And then in our cycle assessment for E will be expository, but 4th grade may not mirror that. But the assessment window will be the same. They all are grounded with like an essential question that frames the whole unit, very similar to K2. And they're thematic units. You can see one of our new ones is called Finding Solace Through Literature. It's very heavily influenced by the arts. So that, remember that state kind of rule or mandate of content area connections. And then our other new one is Earth's Mightiest Natural Disasters, which has a geography emphasis and also for social studies, but also obviously science and earth science. We have our same social studies ones that have always been around. They just may be refined or at least revised to include the new standards. So that's just a little snapshot of a year at a glance. And then we have a new module H about real life role models. And we are trying to incorporate as many books from the BEST list, the state recommendations for text. Sometimes it does not work out because of like publication. We can't get enough copies because like we just need like 10,000 copies of most of these books. And the publishers may not be able to accommodate that, but we're trying. All right, so that's our year at a glance update. There will also be in grades 3, 4, and 5, the first 8 weeks of school, cursive handwriting instruction. There are actual lesson plans. It is a 15-minute block of time. And we have adjusted the reading and the writing to accommodate this additional piece in the ELA block.
And that's in what grades?
3, 4, and 5. And the cursive handwriting lessons in 3, 4, and 5 will be exactly the same in all 3 grade levels this year because they haven't had exposure. So even though in 5th grade our standard is that they would like write eloquently in cursive, we'll just be happy if they can sign a beautiful signature and maybe like take a stab at some phrases and some sentences in cursive handwriting. In years to come, we will adjust 4th and 5th with the assumption that they've had some background knowledge in it. After the first 8 weeks, so after module A and B, 4th and 5th grade will take that 15 minutes of time for cursive handwriting, and they will now practice keyboarding or typing skills. So 4th and 5th grade, after module B is done, they do the first 8 weeks to cursive, they will then transition and use that 15-minute time that used to be handwriting for typing skills. And that's simply as a kind of a reaction or just as a way to, because we know that maybe the state assessment will be computer-based, including the writing piece. And we want to give them an upper hand to be fluent in doing that, obviously. Somebody asked me in the earlier 2 sessions, 2 different people, so I know it may be a question on your mind, like, are we going to have our cycle assessments be typed? I don't think that's a terrible idea. We're still thinking about the first go because they wouldn't have had like any practice. I think that could be disastrous and a little hard for us to see what they're capable of doing as a writer. But certainly I could see us doing that in our second writing assessment, cycle assessment. What was I going to say? Oh, I know what I was going to say to that. When it comes to pacing or timing of cursive handwriting, I think 15 minutes is a little bit of an I think it's just a little too generous, to be honest. I've looked at the lessons. The lessons to me are very doable in like 10-minute stretches of time. And I would be prioritizing, if I were you, in your schools, like I want my measly 30 minutes of writing. I want as much time in that as I possibly can get. So if I can even devote 5 more minutes to that as opposed to the cursive handwriting, that's what I would do. Because it's like lowercase I. So the teacher models the stroke, shoop, shoop, ding. And then the kids are like, shoop, shoop, ding. And then the teacher's like, again, shoop, shoop, ding. Or I'm making up the sound effects, but whatever it is. Yeah, I mean, you were intrigued, you were engaged. Okay, I mean, how many I's can we do in 15 minutes? Because so they'll start with the strokes of a lowercase the first 4 weeks, and then the second 4 weeks they'll do uppercase and start learning how to actually connect. Yes, questions?
After the first 8 weeks, does the 15 minutes for 3rd grade just go back into the?
They absorb theirs into, that was a good question, I forgot to say that, they independent reading time. So, which I think is yes, we want. They won't have that same typing component. Another new component of our block is the word study. So there will be explicit instruction around word study now. I think this has been needed and it's super well received at our module rollout so far. 3rd and 4th will be things like syllabication, segmentation. I don't know, I kind of made up segmentation, but segmenting, I teach 5th now, so so far out of that range. But what I will say is in 5th grade, ours is more about morphology, applying our understanding, which I'll freshen up on, of those foundational skills and all of that. But I will say you could borrow, for a 5th grade teacher, if she or he knows that there's a child who maybe doesn't have segmenting or whatever it is, whatever phonemic awareness. It's not like you can't go borrow word study lessons from another grade level and kind of bridge the gap that way. I will say word study is allotted for 15 minutes of time. Sometimes it may take you 15 minutes of time. As long as teachers, what I told them at module rollout is time yourself for 10 minutes because word study is really nothing without the practice piece. So if you just talk for 15 minutes and they don't get any opportunity to practice, you've really done a disservice to the kids and your lesson, you don't know what was the purpose or the point of it. So that's been my suggestion to them. Convention spotlight. So there are not separate conventions lesson. There's not a DOL to start their day, but the conventions will be much more intentionally designed so that we're not skipping over any of them, I guess. So we've always embedded the convention work into ELA, but even more so now we're going to try to highlight that work so they can apply it in real life settings in writing. And today when I show you a writing lesson, I'll show you how that might be explicitly taught within a writing lesson. Any questions about what's new so far? Okay. We did our year at a glance, and now what we're going to do is we're going to take a closer look at actual lessons, and I'm just going to kind of throw a few of these out, and again, you can, you're going to pass them on, and I'll take any extras that you have. There are 3 different lessons in this packet. There's a word study lesson. There's if you just want to take one and pass it on to wherever the extras land, I can grab them. There's a word study lesson, there's a reading lesson, and there's a writing lesson, and then a couple other resources we'll look at in a minute. You're going to want to look at your lesson side by side with that little guide sheet. So you know that little guide sheet that had the components on it? You're going to want to have that out and your lesson plan out.
Yeah.
And you're not going to read through every lesson. We're going to jigsaw it out for sake of time. Now, I had a color coding system. That was like such a good idea in my mind. And the color coding system was that there's 5 components, and there's 5 little flags or stickies in the middle of your table. So I assigned a color to each of the components. There was some stress, you guys, in the beginning sessions of like, what color means what? So if you would like to come up with your own color coding system, or just write on your little flag as you're marking things up, that's totally, I'm open to all interpretations of the color code system. But here's what you're gonna do. You are going to assign, again, let's kind of break this into smaller groups of 3, no more than 4. No, forget that. You're going to have one person do word study, just read word study, or a couple people if you have a larger group. 1 or 2 people are going to read just the reading, and 1 or 2 people are going to read just the writing. In the next 5 minutes of time, a true 5 minutes of time, you are going to be reading the lesson plan and looking for evidence of those components of high quality instruction. Are there more components of high quality instruction? For sure. Are there other high quality strategies you will see that are evidence-based? Of course. But let's focus our time on these 5 components. You're going to label, you're going to become an expert on this lesson plan so that you can share out what you uncovered or discovered with the people at your group. Got it? 5 minutes.
All right.
Yes. Yes.
You guys, you have a word study, so you're on the first page, and you're sharing.
Just setting a timer. Yes, you can write on your lesson plan.
See, then they're reading and writing.
Oh, you may not see corrective feedback, right? But you're going to see supports within the lesson that would allow teachers to do or to implement corrective feedback, or you might even see opportunities and flag those opportunities for corrective feedback. Use your guide or your little cheat sheet to justify why you're marking something. You have just under 2 minutes to learn your lesson plan. Oh yeah, you're also going to teach that. No, you're not going to teach it. You do not have to teach your lesson.
Yes. Green. I don't know, I think I did a green. I might have been a back. Tore them all off.
That guide's going to give you some language to support you when you share out. Let's see how much time we got. 42 seconds. And word study, you're on deck to go first. All right, that is time. So here's how this is going to go. If you were studying the word study lesson, the rest of us are going to be actively listening to you, so everyone's going to flip back to word study. And then you, and if you have a partner who also looked at word study, are going to be sharing basically the gist of the lesson, a sentence or less. All right, and then also what components, walk us through the components that you see or see opportunities for, okay? And you have like 1 minute to share out to your group. Go.
Well, that's what I did. I went into writing and found it in but that's what I did.
That's what I did at junior differentiation as well. And then there's opportunity for some scaffolding.
What we just did. Find where
They do the guided practice. I did it lesson.
I did it
Then you get into the guided practice, which there, again, do your that's what I get. And I started in that area.
If you haven't started, our reading experts can go ahead and share the reading lesson plan.
So reading history, which could be, it could be the first one that I feel like here, it's scattered.
Also, it has, the OP levels right here.
So this is I mean, there are like,
You know what, I was, for whatever reason, I was just gonna go, you know, I don't.
corrective feedback, so there's an opportunity for it on the portion of organizer and the data related.
Yeah. I love those.
Alright, so I get that this is the rubric that we're gonna use.
Well, this
Why does
is,
it say ELP?
yeah, because it's not necessarily the yes, but it's not necessarily the rubric, it's our ELA support, or EL supports. So these are the level of proficiency
Okay.
for
So like
our EL learners.
That's the proficiency.
Performance indicators.
Yes. Well, no.
No, it's for the EL.
Yeah.
Right.
So we need a standard performance indicator.
They're part of it. It's like, this is what you're able to do if you're at a level 1. This is what you.
So, and they really push to have them on the lesson plan for those who have, because they may need to pull those kids aside, and this is going to be their target and scaffold them to this point.
We could scaffold
Yeah.
there.
I feel like you need to mark it with some color, just to draw the attention to that point. But yes. And in writing, if you haven't had an opportunity to share the writing lesson plan, we'll move into writing.
Their web and then the systematic. That's the one where.
So we noticed, like, word study, it just says 15 minutes.
I know, I
But
don't
then
know
here,
why.
Like, it'll break it down.
Reading and writing, we always break it down. So they have 3 separate writers on their, even though we heavily do it together, the company that's creating the customized curriculum with us, they have 3 separate writers, like a person who just does word study and a person who just does reading and a person who just has writing. And it does bug me, and I did flag it as like not being the same. Because so this year we're printing the lesson plans. I should have told you this, guys, to you guys earlier. But then whatever feedback we have like this year to make these changes, and then years 2 through 5 are kind of set in stone. But at least this year, when we notice, do you want to just keep this? Just keep that for your troubles. I noticed that too. I don't know why they don't break it down into the components of the word study block. I'm not
I know,
sure.
like, the primary, like, that's what the teachers struggle with, is like how many minutes to spend on each part.
Each part, and
So it was
that,
interesting that wasn't broken out like these were.
which I wish it was. It will be in future modules, and because like we're only to module D, we're developing D right now, and then we have wrap-up tasks, so that'll be like a wrap-up task. It's just to say, can you please like cue this out? That's why I told them, like, your I do and your we do and word study better not take more than 10 minutes, because then there's no time for practice. We modeled it at the rollout. We'll probably model one every rollout, because pacing will be an issue.
As we're going through, then, I mean, with A through C already being printed and at the schools, if we have feedback, if we see anything that maybe needs to be looked at.
Oh, you can email me, but you can also email Angela Martinoff. I'll put her name up there. She's our like go-between between PCG, the company, and PCS, our district.
All grades?
But if you email
I actually
me,
would rather send it to a county person.
if you email me, it's gonna get where it needs to
So for
get.
all grades?
3, 5. I mean, it doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter. Dolores Hudson, you know Dolores Hudson? Yeah, of course. She's K2 focused.
Okay, so J2 for her, I mean, for Dolores.
Yeah.
And 3-5 for you.
Right.
Not that
But-
there will be any corrective feedback.
There will be, I mean, maybe not in 5th,
Right.
but, you know, I'm sure third and fourth might have some areas to strengthen. All right, that was longer than anticipated. I'm sorry about that. Yes, yes.
It's like here that it's a teacher resource. Will they have to go to Canvas to get it, or will it already be printed in there?
There will literally be nothing that says like to find it that won't be printed for them.
Perfect. That's what I
The
wanted.
only I say there's literally nothing, and then I say the only thing. But the only thing is the small group lesson plans are printed, and we provide small group lesson plans. But if there's additional text needed for those, we have the text and they're posted on Canvas. But we didn't know how many copies you would need at your school if you have multiple. That's the only thing that if
So
they're
even,
searching.
like the anchor charts and
It's
example
in
of
there.
it is printed for
Yes.
yes.
Like everything. And if there's ever one thing, we will print it as a district and send it out to them in a random little packet. But then in years 2 through 5, we'll make sure it got
Just the
put in there.
text used for small group lesson plan.
That's the only thing that they shouldn't, if they can't find something, they need to tell us right away so that when we reprint, we're only reprinting one other time after this year. But this is our opportunity to be like, this is missing and we need it for next year. But I don't think they're going to run into that problem, but you don't know. All right, so for sake of time, oh yeah, okay, here we go. Oh, before we get to that, actually, real quick, I'm throwing stuff. I just wanted to point out a couple of things on the lesson plan templates themselves. So in the instructional supports where it says during lesson, if you go back to word study, it'll be the same in word study, reading, and writing. The success criteria for every single lesson has been revealed, already done for them, developed for them. So the success criteria can be found teacher directed, like teacher language, where it says to determine student success, right here in instructional supports, consider, and then these are questions for the teacher. Did the student? In reading, if you go to reading, flip 3 pages in till you get to independent practice in reading.
Here, instructional support.
Yes, that's your success criteria. In reading, what they do that's really nice, and many times in writing as well, they also list the success criteria again, obviously the same success criteria, but this time in student-centered language. So one of the things we really worked on as a district was success criteria and making that visible to students so that they have a fair chance of being successful in that lesson. That's what a student must do in that lesson to be successful. Do you also see where it says on that same page in reading, for students who need additional support, and then in bold it says the Module A Reading Data Tracker? So that's another resource after the writing lesson that you'll find in here. So the data tracker. So on that same page where you go to independent practice and reading, it's 3 pages in, there's the student-centered success criteria, so student-facing, I should say. And then you have where it says, for students who need additional support, refer to the Module A Reading Data Tracker. So there's an example of that data tracker for each of the focus benchmarks in your packet. If you were one of the people that were sharing out the writing work, one of the things you may or may not have shared is that there was a mid-workshop interruption. Now that mid-workshop interruption was centered around capitalization. Students by 5th grade should already know those capitalization rules, but we're just gonna, for fun, give them another go around with the capitalization rules. Teachers can choose whether or not that merits whole group instruction time based on what their kids are doing. But what I like about everywhere we've inserted convention work is we've also showed them how you play with those conventions for effect for your reader. Like in this case, when you capitalize every word, that's to show a strong emotion. So learn the skill and then learn how to play with that skill. Last thing, in the reading data tracker, go to the reading data tracker. So the reading data trackers in 5th grade are very extensive. The 3rd and 4th grade have something very similar. Where teachers can track their data. What I really like about the 5th grade version is it just tells you, okay, well, what do you do with a student who's performing at a level 1 or a level 2 or a level 3 being the benchmark, right? 1 and 2 being below, and a level 4 exceeding the benchmark. And one of the things it tells you you can do if you see a level 1 and 2 for this particular benchmark is it tells you to refer to differentiated small group support lesson 1. There's a lesson that's already been designed. There's actually a total of 6 lessons per module that are small group lessons to practice this benchmark. There will be 2 focus reading benchmark standards that have a differentiated small group lesson progression. So you'll get a support lesson, meaning your 1s and 2s, a review lesson where it's like we just need another go at it, maybe with a different text which we'll provide, and then a challenge lesson for those kids who are meeting that benchmark, able to do what that 3 says, but how do we get them to be challenged and still stay within the constraints of our benchmark for that grade level. So a total of 6 small group lessons, and then obviously if you start here with a group and they're ready for the review lesson, it could become a progression for the same group if they see that is fit. All right, I am out of time, which I think is perfect time. That is all I have for you guys. Thank you so much.